Wherever you're watching us all over the world, welcome to this special edition of TV Bakwetu. Today, we continue with what we started last week. We'll be talking about the agriculture sector in Zambia. And the theme of today's program is a roadmap for creating a vibrant agriculture sector in Zambia. Just some synopsis. With all that continues to happen within Zambia's agriculture sector, it is easy for anyone to feel that our present challenges are too complex to be addressed within a short time. Our guest today argues that it is very much possible to turn around Zambia's agriculture sector within 3 years, and for it to and for it to demonstrate clear positive developmental results that begin to attract capital and some of our best human resource. Dr. Christian Chileshe, who is our guest today, is a development practitioner with particular focus on entrepreneurship and agribusiness. He has spent much of 30 years of his career promoting inclusive and sustainable market systems that work for Africa. Agriculture continues to lend itself as a means to including the poor and to lifting many out of poverty. Christian joins us in a series of discussions that provide clear action points for the transformation of Zambia's agriculture and indeed for the rest of Africa. 4 steps over 3 years. In the next installment of the series, Christian presents a four-step 3-year roadmap for transforming the agriculture sector. He insists that the roadmap does not in any way suggest that the desired results would come easily. It will take practical will and involvement of specific stakeholder. First of all, I'll start by introducing my co-guest, Mr. Bimbe, my co-host, Mr. Bimbe. Welcome to this special edition of the Bakwetu TV.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chilufya, and thank you very much to our guest, Dr. Christian Chileshe. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you again to share your insights and your vast experience in this sector, which is really, really important to our country. If we are to survive, we are to really come true with the diversification from our mineral-based economy. And to our viewers, welcome. You joining us wherever you are, and please share the link to anyone. This will be a really, really interesting and very educative topic. So for those that are really thinking of going into agriculture, I think this is for you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Dr. Chileshe, can you just introduce yourself briefly before we can start the program?
Okay. Thank you for having me on the program, and good evening for those in Zambia, and maybe it could be good morning for others elsewhere. But I'm glad to be on the program and to discuss a very important matter. My name is Christian Chileshe. I'm a development practitioner. My background originally was in accounting and finance, but I've spent the larger part of my career in entrepreneurship and agribusiness. Been doing consulting work. I'm a farmer myself. I've engaged myself in different forms of agribusiness. Right now, I'm based in Sierra Leone on consulting assignment, supporting the Sierra Leone people with agribusiness and other areas of enterprise development.
Thank you, Dr. Chileshe. We'll bring you back. And our viewers, wherever you're watching us, please share this program. It's a very important program. Agriculture is a very important sector for Zambia. Governments after governments since 1964, they've been talking about liberalizing our economy into the agriculture sector, and this has not yet happened. So this is why we are talking about this, because agriculture sector can create a lot of jobs, to most Zambians. Yeah. And I can see Chinoda Nguira there is a farmer from Eastern Province. Is my Mbuya. Chinoda, just sit in the background. We'll bring you in. Uh, Once I ask my guest a question, and then you can follow up. So just keep on watching in the background. Welcome to Bakwetu TV. So over to you, Mr. Bimbe. Your first question to Dr. Christian Chileshe. We can't hear you. You muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you for giving me the first opportunity to really pick Christian's brain. The context we are discussing this issue is really important, and you've emphasized the whole essence of having really good political will and involvement specific stakeholders. Obviously, to come up with that, you need some sort of a formal kind of arrangement. So my first question, therefore, is why is it important to have a very good policy or strategy for creating a vibrant agriculture sector in Zambia?
Okay. Well, I guess my first statement, which I'm hoping I'll be coming back to, is that positive change doesn't just happen; it is caused. Okay, positive change doesn't just happen; it is caused. And we have had aspirations within the agriculture sector. I think many of us are very clear what we feel the agriculture sector should look like. Okay, so in many people's minds, the end point is clear. What we have been struggling with is the roadmap to move from where we are to where we should be. And the vehicle that can move us from where we are to where we should be is a kind of a strategy, a roadmap. I'm avoiding using the word strategy because of its different meanings to different people. I'm using the word roadmap. It's a combination of very practical steps and things, if you like, that can move us from where we are to where we would like to be. Many attempts have been made. Okay, so it's not for lack of trying that we are where we are. In fact, there has been some movement. Let's be fair. We have moved to some extent. Sometimes we have moved in the wrong direction. Sometimes we have ended up coming backwards. So there's been a lot of movement. There have been many attempts. There are many lessons that have been learned. So now what I'm advocating for is political will, especially because we need leadership. This thing needs leadership, and it sits mostly in the political environment, because you have at any one point a party or a coalition of parties that are heading government. So there's a leadership that is required from government, and a lot of that comes from who is behind that government. So my argument, if we have some political will and follow through the specific things that I hope we'll talk about today, and maybe later as we unpack it, then we should be able to have a scenario where we begin to move consistently in one direction. And as we begin to see benefit, it begins to feed into itself. Because as people begin to see the benefits of progress, there's more energy generated. You have now support from more angles, and we're likely to see clearer and much better results. This is how all other countries have managed to move to where they are, as we look at them and we feel they're doing better than us. There is no other way. It is creating a roadmap and working consistently against many odds and getting to a point where results begin to show. And when results begin to show, the whole thing begins to feed into itself, and it becomes much bigger than what anybody could have even envisaged. So the roadmap is critical because it sets a direction, it brings resources together, and it begins to show results that help fuel it.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian. I think just I'll just want to add on that there. You have explained that a good policy environment, as well as a roadmap to hold this thing together, is very important. In our just brief discussion backstage, you also mentioned that, I think, let me put it this way, this roadmap and the policies and that comes out of it has to have an owner. It has to have an overseer ministry. In Zambia today, we seem to have fragmented agriculture as ministries. Is that really conducive in this stage, or is it just making things a little bit harder in terms of policy ownership and strategy over ownership in that sense?
Well, the moment you actually split what you call agriculture from what you call livestock, already you're beginning to see problems. And like I said last week, because of the work I've done over many years that are linked to agriculture, I'm aware of some of the challenges that the livestock component has faced within the broad agriculture arrangements within the ministry. So you have a livestock component that has struggled, that has not been given the space it needs, because it's an important component of agriculture. And as a result, there's been this advocacy to have a separate ministry. It's not a solution. Structurally, it fragments what should be together and what is interrelated. When you're working with communities, you are not working, and these agriculture communities, you are not working with them on crops separated from livestock. That's an integrated process that should be seen together, and whatever strategies should be combined. So already that is an indication of issues that we are not prepared to face. And this is where the political will comes in. Okay, that's number one. Number two, we do have a lot of documentation that has been generated. I'll tell you what, at continent-wide level, we do have, for instance, I think that was 2003, the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, CADIP, okay? Maputo Declaration, I think, 2003. And I think it was reaffirmed in 2013, okay? And recently, I think this year, there was a meeting in Dakar, and there have been a few other meetings that I have personally even contributed to in terms of further unpacking agriculture and seeing how it can be sustainable and become the main thrust for Africa's development. And now the issue is that this needs to be domesticated, because there is no Africa without the respective countries. Okay, remove the respective countries, you don't have a land called Africa. So if this thing is going to work, it has to be domesticated. There has been some effort made there, and we have various policies that have been developed, and plans that have been developed, and there are a lot of them. We don't even have to come up with completely new plans. And I've challenged the duty bearers. I've said, if you brought together experts and ask them to review what is available, and from there say, look, given where we are, given what we have, many agriculture development programs in Zambia, donor funded, have generated knowledge that should help us be in a better footing. I mean, the Finnish funded one thing, the Swedish were very active in another area. The US government has been involved heavily in agriculture in another way, and so on. And I can go on. And a lot of those initiatives have generated a wealth of knowledge, including human resource that has been on the ground and has tried one thing, maybe it has failed, or something has worked very well. So now, what we haven't done primarily is to bring all of that together and come and say, okay, what do we already know? Okay, and how do we proceed? I would like to refer to what Obama is said to have insisted on when he became president. He brought together experts and said, tell me what needs to be done to develop the country. I will know how to sell it to the people. Here is a man who knows his role as a politician, because politicians are particularly good at selling ideas, to people and visions and so on, and getting buy-in. That's the definition of politics: rallying people around a cause and moving with that. But then you want to have content that you are going to use. So you must respect the fact that there are experts. I'm not saying they are all going to be very helpful, but from the pool of what we have, are we willing to come together and look at what we have, and then from there craft, even if it's different scenarios, different options that fit within the government's aspirations? Because the government does want agriculture to develop. That's not the question, okay? And they do have, the party in government does have a manifesto that clearly articulates what they would like to achieve. Okay, that's clear. So we are on the same side up to that point. But when it comes to now saying, how do we achieve this? This is where they need to draw on existing knowledge, existing human resource, to actually say, give us the scenarios, give us the options, and we will select. I mean, they should retain the right to decide which roadmap they're going to use. That's okay. They are the ones in power. But they must have a knowledge-based roadmap, a roadmap informed by what is clear and practical, and what can move us consistently from one point to the next. So those are issues we need to solve. Beyond policy, we need to unpack, we need to have champions that are going to drive a very clear and practical process that involves relevant stakeholders, because government cannot do it alone. But government is responsible for rallying stakeholders, selling the vision, and making sure there's sufficient buy-in. And there are different ways of doing that. It is not even for government to come up with the mechanisms for that. We have experts in different spheres of life that can support how everything can work. And that is why you need to tap in to that kind of expertise.
That was fantastic, Christian. Mr. Bimbe, any follow-up question before I can ask Christian a follow-up question?
I'll come in. You come in first. I'll come in as.
So do you want me after that? I can go into the second question.
I don't know whether this one will be part of it, is because it's quite interesting in the sense that we seem to have done a lot of stuff in Zambia. And I can attest to that. There's a lot of donor funding that has gone into helping the thinking into this, and we produce so much knowledge. And then we try maybe on pilot kind of thing, but we don't seem to learn from what worked, what didn't work. So I suspect there is a gap there. My other worry, I don't know what your view is as we come to the next question, which probably will be part of the next question, is also this idea that it seems to me, when we talk agriculture, this everyday national thing, the big elephant, FISIP, clouds the whole strategic thinking into the kind of future of what we are saying. Yes, we need to deal with the immediate, but also we need to be thinking, how do we win off from that? Does it work? How do we reform it? Yeah, what's your view on that?
Well, obviously, a politician's dilemma is how do you do what you know needs to be done, but do not lose support, because you are dealing naturally with human beings who struggle with pain naturally. So if you introduce measures that are difficult, but which are necessary, of course, there is a likelihood that at least for that period of time, you lose popularity. And one of the aspirations of politicians is that they stay in power, whether it's the same leader staying in power or the political party staying in power. Okay. Now, here's the thing: a politician has 5 years, okay, in which to do what they think they need to do. How that 5 years is used ultimately determines whether they leave a legacy or transform a country as they may have intended. There's a lot of there's a challenge that needs to be addressed in agriculture. Agriculture has to do with food, and the majority of Zambians in one way or another are involved in agriculture. So shift anything in agriculture, you are shifting something about people's lives and livelihoods, okay? And there are some things that have to be done, which may be painful in the short term. So using the first 3 years of a government becomes very important, because it is in that 3 years that you can administer the difficult and painful treatment that will later begin to show results. When you miss the first 3 years, you end up with the second half of your term of office, and in that the second term, if you try something difficult that does not bring results by the time you're going to election, then you lose the election, even if you are doing the right thing. Okay. So now, what is needed is for a party in government to quickly begin to institute measures that can create the necessary transformation that may include some pain. Because look at how we are managing agriculture. Look at how the FISIP, for instance, and whatever else it may be called over time, is using up the budget. But what is FISIP? If you look at it, it's a social welfare program, okay? And there is room for social welfare programs that will make fertilizers and seeds and other inputs available. That's not even the problem. But if we're going to call that agriculture, then we're simply playing on ourselves. We know, everybody knows that that's not agriculture. That's social welfare. It's not leading towards development. It's sustaining in the short term, but not leading towards development. How much investment are we putting in ensuring that we create structural transformation, invest in things that will bring results 2 to 3 years downstream? There is not as much of that being done. We do have a national agriculture investment plan. In fact, it expired. I think there's a new one being worked on, if it has not been worked on already. The last I remember, there was a call for consultants to work on that one, and somebody brought that to my attention. It was a good document. What did we do with the previous one? Okay, it is very elaborate, very clear, and provides good pointers. It was a technical document really done. It has nothing to do with one political party or another. How did we work with the previous one? How are we going to work with the next one? So those are questions that we need to ask ourselves. Within the Ministry of Agriculture, unless things have changed in the recent past, we have a directorate of policy and planning. I don't know what they might also call it now, but it's basically, for a long time, it was called policy and planning. That's one department that needs to provide leadership. When we're saying the first thing we have to do is make sure we have a clear roadmap, that directorate is very instrumental in ensuring that there is clear direction for agriculture in Zambia. For the many years that I interacted with the ministry, there was nothing much happening there. Okay, there is a lot of research that has been done, but how is it being brought down to extension? I can see a comment there that has popped on my screen by Dalton Mukumbi, I think. There is a lot of research that has been done. In fact, a lot of it is applied research, practical things, not from a classroom, practical things on the ground. It is there. Do we have a coordination of the application of this research to practice so that we can begin to see some of the results and then scale up from there? So these are specifics that we can think about. And leadership within the ministry, leadership at national level, because the Minister of Agriculture needs to be given marching orders right from the presidency. This is how Malawi managed to turn itself around at one point. Okay, of course, it has slid back. And there's a book written about that by Professor Kalistas Juma, okay, late now. And it tries to bring out how we did that. The president took on the Minister of Agriculture himself. He says, I will be the Minister of Agriculture. And he led from the front, okay? Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that has to be done for any results to happen. But clearly, State House needs to prioritize agriculture, give marching orders, ensure there is space for innovation, for thinking, for trying things, for learning, ensure that the right people are in office, and holding them accountable, expecting results, milestones that have been developed over time. And we will see results if we use that kind of an approach. Leadership, leadership, leadership. Those are the first three most important things that are needed. Political leadership, technical leadership, private sector leadership. We do have a private sector that can also be coordinated to also play their role, because that's how the National Agriculture Investment Plan was written. You know, there is government, there is private sector, there is the development sector, okay? And each one playing their role, but the coordinator has to be government. That is clearly important.
Christian, that was fantastic. I can start picking up things there. Political will, and then clear and actionable plan. You've clearly stated that we've got a lot of research that has been done on agriculture, pure research, and a lot of plans over since 1964. But it looks like implementation is an issue there. And you've also mentioned nothing can happen by accident. You have to plan it. It has to be caused. But the point I'm trying to raise here, Christian, before I can go into my next question, our current government, UPND, has got a manifesto which I have on agriculture, and our president, through campaign, traveling throughout the country, he started talking about each province where he traveled. And if you look at, because my question is, when that strategy is done, that's my first part. Don't you think they need to have a strategy for each province? And this is what the president was sounding during the campaign. The president was lamenting that he went to Luapula and some other provinces. It rains a lot. They've got a lot of grass. And yet, Southern Province, which is becoming like a desert, there isn't so much rain. Look at Eastern Province. There is so much rain there, good soil. So they can do a lot of maize there. But 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 it's like it's only in Southern Province where where you can find livestock, um, um, uh, cows. Why can't we have a strategy of also developing that in Luapula? Like the president was lamenting about Luapula, that there's so much grass there, there's so much rain. Why can't we move some of the animals to Luapula and they start, growing? So my question is, when we have such a strategy, do you think each province within the bigger strategy, if each province can have, like what they call, is it economies of no. They call it competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Can they come up with a strategy about each province in form of competitive advantage, so that they know that Luapula can have beef, Northwestern Province can grow bananas, and what Chinsali can grow sugarcane. In that strategy, what do you think?
First of all, we have agroecological zones, and we know what can happen within each zone, what's possible. There is enough knowledge, and Zambians have that knowledge. Technical people, very well knowledgeable people that can actually, from the top of their heads, even just tell you, this is possible here, that can happen there, that can happen, and so on. Okay, so we know that. Then again, we have experts that understand the social cultural dynamics. Okay. Within our country, and have related that to development. Again, we have been schooled to our teeth, if you like. We know that, for instance, you can't just take cows to certain parts of this country; they'll eat them. Umunani, as they would say, it's relish. Okay, and then you have certain parts of the country where people, because there is this prestige around having livestock. I have worked in one region I won't mention, where I was coordinating food relief, and I had a list of families that were included. So I decided to do some inspection. So I visited a number of families, and one of the families I visited had 104 cows, but they were on the list. They were affected by famine because that year there was not enough rain and so on, and they were in need. Now you can imagine, they have 104 cows, and they are saying, look, I have no food, I'm starving. I need relief, but what that tells you, of course, I did not proceed with including them, because now I had to now counsel them around what their options were, given the assets that they had. Okay, but that tells you the pride that is attached to livestock. They are willing to multiply, to look after it well, and to preserve it so that it reaches certain numbers. And with time, many of them are able to sell a portion of their cows, and you have canters all over the place. And they have tractors now because they can sell a portion of their livestock. Okay, so you see that in southern and eastern province quite a lot. Okay, but certain other parts of this country, we haven't reached that. So when you talk about comparative advantages, it's a social cultural, there's a social cultural dimension that needs to be factored in. So when I talk about bringing experts in the room, I'm talking about bringing people that understand crops and livestock, people that understand the social cultural dynamics, and people that understand how to create plans, how to drive this process of bringing everything together. Okay, and that is what will help us know, for instance, what can we do, not with Luapula per se, but maybe even with a part of Luapula, because we don't know. It depends. That process will tell us whether we can think of a strategy for the whole of Luapula or for part of Luapula. Okay. If we're not careful, we can think moving the people who have cows from southern province to Luapula would be a good thing, because there's grazing land there. But there are social cultural dynamics. How are you managing that? Because you can actually create challenges, social cultural challenges. So even that has to be managed. It's not a bad thing. But how are you going to manage it? You must answer certain questions, because you may need to send some. If you go to Mpika, for instance, the reason why Mpika is doing very well on dairy, okay, quite well on dairy, I think it still is, at least the last I was involved there, is because you had Tongas who moved, because there was Tazara, and a lot of Tongas had actually got employed within Tazara. And so a number of them settled in Mpika because that was the Zambia regional office, head office. Okay, and they began to do what they knew well. They began to keep animals, and with Kaunda and the promotion of dairy, they were introduced to dairy animals and better breeds of them, and so you find that you have livestock and milk production in Mpika. Okay. But then how you integrate those into the broader social cultural environment, it matters. Okay, so there are different strategies that we can use, but yes, we need to think about what should we be doing in this part of the country without necessarily respecting political boundaries. Okay, if yes, it can work for the whole of Northwestern Province, fine, because then it will be easier to administer it if it fits within the political boundary, because it has a structure. A province has a structure. Okay, so if it fits there, then it's easier to manage a governance structure. But if not, then it can be a combination of things. But all of that comes out of this process of saying, how do we implement what we have said is good for us? We are not doing that. We are not bringing experts across the board. They don't even have to be 100. They can be as few as 15, and we may not get it right first time. It might even go through a process of replacing some with others. Eventually, you end up with this team of individuals that can provide the information, and it's taken up by the system, the governance system, and these people carry on with their other lives. And when it begins to produce results, it begins to get improved on.
That's fantastic, Dr. Christian. That leads me to the second question. Though you've answered part of it, but I will just rephrase the question. From our discussion, you passionate about agriculture and mobilization of the stakeholders. It will also you said it will also require stakeholder mobilization. This could leverage on the existing stakeholder structures, with the possibility of influencing change within them and outside them. Now, the point I'm trying to drive home, or a question, is that, so does it mean, yes, the government has got a manifesto, very good manifesto on agriculture, a lot of policies, everything in place, experts, and yeah. But don't you think the government alone is not enough? It requires mobilization of all stakeholders involved. And my point is, do you think we need an indaba where the government brings its plans, the policies, and experts here, all different stakeholders, including banks, funders, and just talk about how we can move. How can we liberalize our economy and come up with a roadmap of a vibrant agriculture sector? Don't you think that is important? Because we've been doing this. We've been talking about liberalization, into the agriculture sector, and we haven't done it. Can't we sit down? Can the experts, everybody involved, including funders, donors, come together and come up with a solution, a roadmap? Over to you, Christian.
Okay. Well, let me start with the idea of the indaba. An indaba is important because it creates profile. It shows the seriousness of what is intended. Okay, it gives a profile. It demonstrates. It puts it in the limelight. The fact that we are serious about agriculture and we're being inclusive, and so we're willing to call everybody that is interested, from the different stakeholders, to come together and to speak about this thing and to demonstrate that we can actually speak with one voice. And from the different speeches that will be made there, we can show that we're actually aligned. The difference is not as much as we might have thought. Okay, so the indaba is important for the purpose of creating profile. Okay, and because you need that. Remember, if you're going to transform agriculture, you want to give it profile. You want to show that it's a big thing that people should be interested in and participate in. The indaba will not solve the problem, the indaba in itself. In fact, the indaba cannot come up with a solution. The solution happens at another lower level where there are some representatives from the indaba. They're willing to sit down. They're willing to work through this. It's quite difficult. It's not very complicated, but it takes a lot of effort. There's a difference between the level of difficulty and complexity. Okay. It is not easy. Okay, it's not complicated, but it's not easy because you need concerted effort where people sit down, invest 2 to 3 months responding to the different challenges that we know exist and identifying ways of moving past those, breaking through. How are we going to deal with this? But the last time we tried this happened. So how will we deal with it this time? There's also this concern that exists. How do we deal with it? So each of the issues has a clear response or an option of responses so that the decision maker now can actually say, for this issue, I'll deal with it this way. Whichever option they pick is informed by knowledge. Okay, so it is that process that will provide the solution. Now, in terms of stakeholders, the private sector has an important role to play. Of course, if we're talking about agriculture, what comes to everybody's mind is the farmers groupings. Zambia National Farmers Union has not been very good at representing the Zambian farmers generally. I will say this without apology because I've conducted systematic work that has brought that out. So it is not in a personal opinion. Okay, they have gravitated towards the large farmers. They will claim to be carrying hundreds of thousands of farmers, but the issues that are being addressed respond to the larger farmers. Okay, so in the end, at some point, there was even a breakaway of what were called, I think, Small-Scale Farmers Association or something like that, National Small-Scale Farmers. I can't remember the exact name. Now, and I don't know how far those have gone, but there are issues to be addressed there. And again, government can provide the coordinating, the facilitation role. There are not directives to be given there, but as a respected party, government can come in and say, what are the issues and how do we deal with them? There's no problem having two associations so that they are focused, if that's what people want, but then how do we work with them? Are they going to reintegrate and become one? How do we make sure we address the issues that led to the split in the first place? So the farmers groupings are the immediate player. How are we engaging them so that we understand the issues and can address them? Later on, those are the people we're going to work with to facilitate change in mindsets, because there are a lot of mindset issues there, okay? But we also have the development sector. You have development partners coming into the country and doing all sorts of development initiatives, some of which may not be advancing the national program. They may be good, appear good in of themselves, but they may not be helping the cause. They can actually be hurting the cause. Okay, and I have done systematic study on this. So again, I can speak without apology, or it's not my personal opinion. There's lack of coordination of donor projects. They come from different parts of the world. They come with their ideologies, and they advance what they think is good for us. And 30, 40, 50 years down the line, we haven't moved much. One of the problems is there's lack of coordination. So again, rallying the donors, having a blueprint which you ask the donors to buy into. I like what Kagame said at Busan. I'm not talking about his political views and all. I'm speaking to a very specific issue that he raised at Busan. I think it's 2011 or so, thereabout, where he says, look, development is our responsibility as government. Donors come to support that which is our responsibility. And if they do not want to buy into the agenda that we have, then they should not come and do anything in the country. Because money can be spent to hurt a cause, to take people backwards. Well intended, okay? But it can still take people backwards. So government must lead the agenda, coordinate the development sector so that they invest in a plan that government has. And so government can say, okay, this is what we want to do. Since you have come, this is what you can do with us. Money doesn't have to be channeled through government, but whatever activities done in Zambia, in the field of agriculture, must fit within the overall government agenda, so that the donors are now partners advancing what is already intended. So that is another stakeholder. We also have stakeholders that are not traditionally seen as being in agriculture, industrialists, captains of industries, as you'd call them. They may be sitting in even different industries, okay? They may be sitting in manufacturing, which is even non-agricultural. But they'll still be looking for, these are entrepreneurs who are looking for opportunities to invest their money, to diversify their investment portfolio. So we need to demonstrate a case for investment in agriculture, because these are players that can come in and say, why are we importing this? They can produce. Or why are we selling raw commodity when there's opportunity for value addition? So they can come in and set up industries that provide what is needed in agriculture, and also who can pick up what is coming out of agriculture. So you have industries developing around agriculture, and the list is endless, okay? Then you mentioned financiers. They also are responsible for managing people's money, so they can't be careless how they lend, okay? So if they're going to put money in agriculture, is it an organized environment where risks can be, first of all, understood and managed without a clear process by the government that creates clarity, that creates a sense of direction? It becomes a landmine that financiers would not want to step into. In fact, one of the things is they have struggled to develop lending models. I've worked with banks in Zambia not very long ago, helping them develop lending models for agriculture, because it's different from trading. If you lend to a trader, you can begin to recover in a short period of time. If you lend to someone who's doing crops, it may not be possible to recover in a very short period of time. So how do you develop a model that manages risk? Okay, because you must. Okay, so those are conversations that we can have. But again, without creating an environment that is clear for the different players to see how they can fit in, it is an area that they're going to keep away from. And it will be very difficult to attract them. People that are, investors that are coming in agriculture are coming on a large scale They are having maybe even forward contracts. They'll grow even things like maize or wheat, which have already been bought, and they'll just wait for the ban to be lifted for maize, and the maize goes where it's supposed to go, or the wheat goes, and so on. So not as much of that is maybe offloaded on the Zambian market. And even when it is, because it is controlled by a few large players, you see that the price of bread does not easily come down, even when we produce a lot of wheat. In fact, if my memory serves me right, Zambia, at least at some point, I don't know about now, was one of the countries that was virtually self-sufficient when it comes to wheat production. Not even South Africa at the time I checked the figures was there. Okay, but why is the price of bread at where it has been? Okay, when we produce so much wheat? Now, that is a problem of probably having few large players who are able to sit together and agree on a certain direction and other issues. And in the end, the processing is done by very few other big players who control the market. So they've been able to control the price. Okay. So now, when we undergo a process of economic transformation, it shifts players around, okay, so that it allows entry of more players where there are opportunities and exit where the opportunities are limited. We'll have fewer traders and more people that are engaging in more productive activities. That is part of economic transformation, and this can happen in the agriculture sector. So there are players we need to be talking to. So number one is the farmer associations and other groupings and cooperatives. Number two, we should be talking to other players such as the development partners. Number three, we can talk to captains of industry and demonstrate a case for investment into agriculture. We can also be talking to financiers that can also see a reasonable basis to put depositors' money into agriculture. And I can go on pension houses are putting money in roads. The same way they are putting in roads, if there was a clear investment case in agriculture, they would, because they will evaluate the return on that investment, okay? And the money can go into agriculture. But are we able to demonstrate a case? We have not organized our agriculture sector up to that level, and that is a duty of certain, what we call duty bearers, and the government sits at the top of that list.
Christian, you've mentioned something very important. The other day, I was talking to somebody. I don't want to mention his name, and he kept on arguing about, NAPSA investing money into that road and everything. And then I challenged this person. This person appears to be from the opposition. I challenged this person that look at some of the projects the previous government did. No plan, no model. You come and put a white elephant, and then you borrow money. How is that money going to be paid back? And then I gave a specific example of this road, which is going, from Lusaka to Ndola. It has got a model how it's going to be managed, it's going to be built, how the money is going to be paid back. You tell me any sensible funder who refuse to put money. That's why you find Workers' Compensation Fund, NAPSA trying to invest money in there because there's a model and they know that the risks are very low. They will recover their money and they will grow the money for the pensioners and the people. Yeah, so you've mentioned something very important there, and you also mentioned something very important about um, investors, because a lot of us think investors will, or development partners will just come and develop our country. But you mentioned something very important there, saying they need to be our partners. And also, they need to work within the framework of the government agenda. So, which means the investors need, whatever investors bring here, they need to fit into our environment and agenda. So, which means we need to have a clear plan, clear agenda. You know, That was an
Yeah.
important point. Mr. Bimbe, over to you. Before Christian can comment on that.
I don't know. I can come in. That was really wonderful. This coming together of experts, around obviously the off-takers, which is on the demand side, the banks in the finance side, and others, you guys in development because you really mentioned a very good thing, the cultural aspect. That's a very, very important. And I never thought of that. I'm just wondering, why do they, have cows in the southern but not in the other yet? So that is a very, very good point. I just come to realize that actually there is, I don't know whether you've heard of this, the president last year touted this World Bank funded project, or rather grouping, called Public-Private Dialogue Forum. And within it, which I'm looking at, it's got an agriculture technical working group. I'm just wondering whether you are aware of that, and if you so, what do you think of it? And if you're not, could it be the right vehicle to start dealing with that, bringing together of experts? So far, I've just looked at the issues that they're looking at currently. They seem to me to be much at a lower level, not at the strategic level type. So could this be the thing that could actually create that grouping that can then start creating these thinking around the policies, around the strategy, around all the pieces that can go together to create that sustainable agriculture that you've been talking about?
Okay. This initiative of having these working groups is great. It is good. Okay. But when you're addressing a problem such as the issues we have in agriculture, you need a combination, an interplay of different initiatives that take you up to the tipping point. Okay, there's no point raising it up to a certain point, and because it does not reach the point where it goes over, it comes back down. And so you have a lot of initiatives that have taken us back and brought us down because they have not reached the tipping point to go over. So you can have a working group, okay, of different individuals, and there'll be great input and ideas, but what is it forming a part of? Because that in itself cannot solve the problem. There has to be a mechanism that's saying, okay, what we're trying to achieve is come up with a clear roadmap. You have a core team that is actually synthesizing knowledge that is being obtained. Then you can have many working groups. I mean, it doesn't even have to be one, because you can create one, but by the time you've created it, has excluded a few other people that could be useful. Or if you try to include everybody, it becomes too big. Okay, so even how you build working groups, you want to create kind of parameters around it so that you don't drown out some of the aspects that are important. You know how we operate in this life. If we're talking about agriculture, then the person well educated in agriculture wants to dominate, but the biggest problems may not even be about the crop science or animal husbandry. They may be social, cultural, like I've said. In fact, I can tell you that the biggest issues that have affected, I said this last week, that have affected agriculture development are social cultural. Because remove those, then people should have seen many opportunities and gone in themselves, with or without government. So government's role, the biggest role that government has, is not to go and show people that there is money to be made here and then walk away. We have done that many times. I have been part of those initiatives. And one of the things we have learned is that awareness does not necessarily lead to behavioral change. I'll say that again. Awareness does not necessarily lead to behavioral change. That we know from research, from looking at how we dealt with the HIV/AIDS problem and many other developmental challenges. It's not enough to make people aware of the benefits of something, because they are locked within a social cultural context that can make them agree to something in terms of saying that is a good thing, but they are not doing it. I have had the opportunity of sitting in rural areas. I spend a lot of time there and even asking those questions, because they will tell me actually what can be done. You know, when you ask a question, how do we solve this? They'll tell you, if we do this, we can solve, and this, and they're very, energized that even showing you that they know. And then after you have had that, you come and say, okay, so why haven't we done it? You should see the laughs, because in a way you even make them feel silly. Because you just asked a very obvious question, and those are not dull people. Rural people are very intelligent. For them to survive in the environments they do, they think, so they are not dull, they are not fools. These are people who are very knowledgeable, very wise, but they are locked in a social cultural context. So when you ask that question, they even know what you're asking them. They can see that you're actually saying, but guys, why are you still in this state when you know that you've just told me? Okay? So now, part of the intervention must address those soft issues. And so when you are saying you want to bring together these working groups, if you isolate only agriculture experts and think they'll give you a solution to agriculture development in Zambia, then we are doing what we have done before. We have done that before, and we have not broken through. So it's a cluster of different kind of groupings that are feeding towards somewhere. So there has to even be a very clear and deliberate thought process that even develops these working groups, because they're not there for their own sake. What are they feeding into? So then there's a synthesis of knowledge filtering in through the agriculture experts, from the social cultural experts, from the political experts, because whatever we are trying to do must be politically expedient, whether you like it or not. If it doesn't serve the interests of the politician, it's not going to happen. Okay, there are very few politicians who can say, like one said, I'd rather be a good one-term president. I'm going ahead with this. It may make me unpopular, but I'd rather be a good one-term president. One president said that somewhere. Okay, not many can say that. So at the end of the day, we must listen to the political side as well, so that whatever kind of roadmap we come up with must also produce political dividends, so that you get buy-in from the politicians that are actually ultimately making the decisions. So an agriculture working group must include a diverse range of people. As much as you may mix them up, you have to be careful to allow all the voices to be heard, because you want to hear the issues. They must be well coordinated and managed by individuals that know how to do it. Because even coordinating those agriculture groups is a skill, which we must recognize. And the person coordinating doesn't even have to be agricultural, because facilitating conversation is a skill in itself that people learn and become very good at. Are we willing to bring them in? And they're there, Zambians. I mean, I think you have one individual that I have a lot of respect for, and I think he has come here on Bakwetu, and you've had discussions with him. I mean, he's demonstrated his ability, and there are many others, men and women, that we must bring in and entrust with the process of saying, look, we would like to get information from these dimensions. Can you drive the conversations, allow the issues to emerge? And then you have people that are synthesizing them, and they're creating scenarios. And so when we go to the politician, you can actually say the different ways of proceeding, because you want to give the politician options. You don't want to tie them to what you think. There are these different options. The politician must interrogate and question. There must be willingness to respond to the difficult questions that the politician will raise. And it is how the clarity of your responses that will convince the politician they can go down that road, and they will not compromise their other interests, which are political. So look, that process can take 6 months, but it's a worthwhile investment of 6 months, because at the end of that 6 months are clear and tangible steps that we can now begin to move in and begin to see results. We still have a planting season coming ahead, and we have a reasonable enough time to begin to think about how we work around some of these issues, and use this first planting season to begin to show results. By the third planting season, the early adapters would have shifted, results are beginning to show, and it begins to feed into itself positively, and that can be used by a politician as a case to continue in office, because what we have started, which is beginning to bear fruit, needs to be, further developed, and that can be a reason for someone to stay in office. So they are not mutually exclusive, but they can work in tandem.
That was fantastic, Christian. Over to you, Dr. Bimbe. The next question.
Oh, Mr. Bimbe.
Oh,
It's
Mr.
Mr. Bimbe.
Bimbe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you want to bring you back to this forum, because I'm becoming curious in the sense that I can see it's chaired by the permanent secretary, and the co-chair is the president of ZNUFU, Zambia National Farmers Union. However, when you look at the participants, or rather the members, they are all part of the associations, different associations. And from what you've said, you still need the social scientists in that group, the anthropologists that understand the behaviors, the cultural norms. I wonder then how such a grouping can be infused with also the diverse voices, which are the villagers themselves at the chieftain level. So I'm just wondering whether there is a way to kind of go to these guys and say, look, this is probably how you want to start it, to look at things, and then try to break it down that way. It is quite an interesting thing. And I think, Patrick, you know, one of the people there, Jacqueline, she's
Yes.
the communication person. So it will be a good idea probably to kind of connect and just see how, because otherwise you've quietly said, we've done all these high level grouping, high level whatever.
Yeah.
It's been the norm. And yeah, that's just me probably overthinking.
Sorry, just to come in quickly. That group has a place. It's good to have it, and it must remain.
Yeah.
But that group, if it's a group of stakeholders, okay, not so much experts in different fields, then that's the group that receives what has been synthesized, so that there's ownership. It must be there in the whole process, because when the experts have done their work and synthesized it and come up with maybe different scenarios, or there are some things that government is comfortable with, and so through the chair, who's permanent secretary, those issues now can be brought to that group. They look at them, they have their input, and it's tweaked around. Okay, so now if that group buys into that idea, because you need stakeholder buy-in when you move to implementation, you need those as champions. They must carry the message out there to their membership, their constituency, and come and say, we have something fantastic, it's going to bring change, let's rally around it. Okay, so they are not going to develop the roadmap. They're going to examine it and feel comfortable that what is captured in the different scenarios that have been developed by the experts can work for them and their constituency. Once they buy into it, then you can now begin to move and say, okay, now let's talk about implementation and how are we going to organize ourselves when it comes to implementation. Okay,
so
ideally
what you're looking at is, we need this grouping, what they've set up already, fine. However, we might need other subgroups that can do specifics and feed into this larger group, because that group, then they are the experts that, you know, this is the evidence, this is what works. They've tried it in their countries. The literature says this is what does work. Can you look at this and then try to push it up? Is that kind of what you are?
Exactly. In fact, even before what about other countries, there are many things we have tried in Zambia that have worked. Okay? So they will bring that up. There are many things we've tried which haven't worked. So that's also a lesson to say, whatever we do, let's not do this. Okay? And then whatever we do, let's make sure we include 1, 2, 3 things. So even just by looking at Zambia and what we have done, there's valuable lessons that we have not mined and we're not using. Then we go to other countries and say, what can we learn from them, so that we don't just proceed without regard to wisdom from elsewhere. Then we can pick up these other lessons as the next level and say, okay, as we proceed with this thing, as we scale up, these are some of the issues we need to think about this is what we may need to do. An area I've not mentioned is technology, and I think, Mr. Bimbe, that's your area, from what I know. We are at a point where we can leapfrog other countries that are struggling. Other countries have invested into certain technologies, and they are trying to get value out of those technologies before they can move elsewhere. Okay, we have not invested in those technologies, so we are not encumbered, we're not held down by those technologies. So now we can immediately leapfrog to another level where we're saying, look, we can lower the cost and improve efficiencies and make it easier to even sell the ideas that we're coming up here because of the existence of technology. So that becomes a platform. Technology is now a platform on which everybody can ride for as long as they have a phone that can do SMS, even if it can't do WhatsApp. Then they have access to important technologies on which they can ride. Okay, so those are different components that we must not fail to bring into the conversation, develop the roadmap using all of these, and then say, okay, now how do we proceed? And these are the scenarios, options, and it goes to that committee, they buy into it, and then the experts help develop the implementation plan that says, where do we start from? Because we can't start everything everywhere. Because of the social cultural dynamics, there are places where you can more easily start, provide a demonstration effect, and using that demonstration now, you can now convince others and get their buy-in. Okay, so where do we start from? What do we start with? What should be next? And how do we proceed? And how do we roll it out in a very organized manner that we are constantly moving forward, even if it's not at the same pace? What activities are complementary? Okay, so when we start this, we must also start this because they kind of feed off each other or energize each other, or they lower the risk of failure as we are doing. So all those things are based on expert input that allow us to move in such a way that we are very clear about what we are doing, what can work, what can't work, and what the level of expected success can be, and the time frames that we can expect that. It must not be as unclear as we sometimes make it look. A lot of these things are clear. Even if there's a drought, we can manage that. Because then we'll be saying, suppose there's a drought. Because when we're now doing risk assessment, we're saying, suppose there's a drought. Suppose there's a flood. Suppose there's this. So we deal with all those scenarios. So at the end of the day, a drought will definitely be a setback, okay? But it will not completely derail the process. Because we've factored that in and we've said, if it does happen, we may not have moved 10 steps. We're going to move 7 steps. But at the end of the day, we're going to maintain forward momentum because we have covered our angles by making sure we are doing this and we're doing that and we're doing the other thing.
That's fantastic, Christian. Mr. Bimbe, before you come in for your next question, Christian, Mr. Bimbe, thanks a lot for bringing up that agricultural dialogue committee. I think that's a starting point. It's very important. And you mentioned our own Jacqueline Shimba as the communications expert in that team. So, Christian, you mentioned clearly when we started this show that we're going to have actionable points, and not only that, we also mentioned that we are a business talk show, and we're not just there like politicians. We're not just there to criticize, but we are also there to offer solutions and to support. So what I would advise is, Christian, look at that document, dialogue thing Mr. Bimbe was talking about. See what you can write, and then we'll connect you to Jacqueline Shimba and see if there's anything, because we need to offer alternatives. We need to support our government, and if you can write even an article, I'll give you Jacqueline Shimba's details, and then write to her, and even try to meet her. She lives in Lusaka. You live in Lusaka, and see if you can meet, because we cannot just leave everything to the government. We also need to, just like the opposition, we have to challenge, and in a very constructive manner. Yeah. And then, so that's the point I was. Then the other thing, Christian, you mentioned something very important: the technology side of things. And it's true, other countries have moved so much in terms of technology. We've got the Ministry of Technology, so I hope they're looking into that, and they should also be involved in that agricultural roadmap, and also the Ministry of Trade and Industry, even small scale. They also need to be involved. But there's another important sector which I've noticed hasn't been involved so much in agriculture, and this is insurance companies. Now imagine if they were involved and there is a good roadmap, a good strategy, insurance companies will start insuring products.
Yeah.
A lot of, and people, because there is cover now, they will be willing to invest money. Banks will be willing to invest money, because what banks will be doing is that's what they do all over the world, even here in the UK. Before they invest money in a sector, there's an insurance company to cover that investment. Credit card companies, banks that offer credit facilities. All those credit facilities are insured. So banks mitigate those risks. Now imagine if insurance companies are involved, then banks will be willing because their risks are mitigated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we do have products, insurance products in agriculture. Okay, they have to obviously be tweaked to suit the environment, and some of them are already being rolled out. Agriculture insurance already exists. It's just about seeing how it can cater for certain level of agriculture. Okay, those are usually the challenges because it's not always developed. But technology helps because the cost of rolling out the products traditionally is high. Okay, just like financing. To bank a small scale farmer is expensive if you want to take a physical bank there and you have tellers that are responding to them. But when you digitize that, okay, it is on a technology platform accessed by a phone that does not even have, it's not even a smartphone. Okay, then you have reached that farmer, you have lowered your costs. So similarly, agriculture products, insurance products can actually ride on the same platform, and there's a lot of actually experience that we have gained on financial inclusion. And when we talk about financial inclusion, we're actually including insurance. So it is savings, it is credit, it is transaction, and insurance. So 4 areas when you talk about financial inclusion. You want them to have an opportunity to save money, and that is generally now there through the mobile companies. You want to have option to access credit. It's already emerging on a digital platform. You want to have transaction options to be able to pay and receive money. But another component which has already moved in is insurance, because you can make insurance contributions in small amounts, and then the premiums are not as expensive because with technology, they can reach many subscribers. And so that pooling of risk, because the insurance works with numbers, so the pooling of risk will ultimately reduce the premiums, because premiums from some will cover calamities of others. So the more numbers you have, the cheaper the premiums, and the lower the risk for the company to fail to meet, to pay out when the event does occur. So technology is transforming how we work, but these are conversations we need to have with insurance companies, and this is why experts come in, because an expert will show numbers. An expert will not express an opinion. They'll sit down and say, look, if you are in actuarial science, you're working with this model. This model, the pillars are 1, 2, 3. So now, if we can meet these pillars and still bank the rural farmer, or still give the rural farmer access to insurance, then why are we not doing it? Because it responds to the fundamentals of your actual model. Okay, so these are the kinds of conversations experts should be able to have with the different stakeholders. And once you make a clear case and the numbers speak to it, and they say numbers don't lie, they're looking for money. They want to make money. If they can, they make that money by providing insurance products to rural farmers. Why would they not do it? You know, so those are opportunities that we must have, and it starts with experts coming together, developing the numbers, and having an informed framework to argue from, and making their case, presenting to the decision makers, and responding to the concerns of the decision makers. And once you have responded to those, no one will not want to develop agriculture in Zambia, because it's a win for all. So the failure is at leadership that should coordinate this kind of process. And that leadership starts with government, but it involves other players as well.
So that's fantastic, Christian. So it's political will, leadership, and it has to be a win-win situation for all stakeholders. Over to you, Mr. Bimbe.
Thank you very much. That was illuminating. That was fantastic. And I concur with you in the modern times nowadays. We always say every enterprise, every business, everything you do is now a digital system. It's a digital organization. That's why there are now these words that they call, we are a digital first company, because digital has moved from being in the back office to actually doing everything. If I remember what you just said about banks, when mobile banking came in, or online banking came in, banks obviously they really wanted to cut their costs, improve their services, they're offering cheaper. But the mindset of people, because we see a bank as a big building, we think our money is safe. But immediately they started talking about banking not as a banking thing, but as a product that can be sold. Then it didn't matter where you buy that product from, really. And I think this is the thinking that we need, the culture or the mindset. And also thinking from inception, technology, digital has to be in the mix as you do the planning.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the next question, actually, which has really fallen really nicely from what we've discussed previously. Why is it so important to have a deliberate campaign or policy to rebrand agriculture in Zambia?
Okay. Now, this is important because if you follow from the conversation, I have argued that social cultural dynamics are some of the biggest barriers to agricultural development. Okay, if they were not there, individuals, because a society has a spectrum of individuals. Okay, some more entrepreneurial than others. They should have stepped in. They should have reaped the benefits while others are watching. But why has it been so difficult for it to drive itself? Even if it's not driven from political will, there are social cultural issues that affect how agriculture is done. It's a traditional activity that we've done for many years, and we struggle to adapt to new ways of doing things. We have our own social cultural issues. I have done work in rural areas in the space of agriculture, and you get comments such as, yes, I know if I did that, I'll make a lot of money. But the moment I start making a lot of money, I'll be bewitched. And how does it profit me to be a rich dead person? So I am prepared not to become rich so that I can stay alive more than repeatedly. This is, at one point I followed this matter and I picked it up in different parts of the country. So it's not even isolated, okay? So, or others will say, look, the whole family, here where I'm in the rural areas, if I begin to demonstrate some wealth, my nephews, because culturally I'm supposed to care for them as well, my sister's children or whatever it is, or my brother's children if I'm female, they'll all be here. The net effect is I'll be worse off. Look, if I have 1,000 kwacha for my 3 children, then if I have 5,000 kwacha and I have, 25 children, the net effect is lower, isn't it? I'm just using that as an example. So a 1,000 kwacha for a small family is better than 5,000 kwacha for a very big family, depending on the numbers. So they'll start saying, ultimately, I'll fail to even look after my family. So I would rather, can you imagine, people literally want to keep their head below the poverty line because they feel socially some things are addressed. The moment they start creating wealth, they move from there and go elsewhere. And I've picked up evidence of some of the successful individuals in certain rural communities are not from that community. They are from elsewhere. Okay, they move into a community and they're making money there. You know, I've seen people move from the very far north and come to the south, and they are making money in that community, you know, more entrepreneurial people groups. So these are issues you have to address. Look, these are realities. They sound petty. Go out there, go and work with the communities. Here where I am, these are big issues, just where I am here in Sierra Leone. Some of the biggest issues have to do with the spiritual beliefs, okay? Witchcraft and all sorts of things that lie in there. Those are some of the biggest issues affecting development. But when you are designing a development intervention, they are ignored because they're difficult to handle. And so we keep throwing money at a situation and we're not breaking through. And we must start asking ourselves, okay, we have addressed all the obvious things. What is still remaining? And as we remove those covers, we discover there's something we've been leaving behind. So when you are talking about rebranding agriculture, you're actually talking about addressing some of those issues, changing mindset, making agriculture attractive, and showing how it does still address some of these issues, okay? Maybe the idea is that not one or two individuals should become wealthy, because in a process that is not managed, it is the few entrepreneurs who will still break through, isn't it? Because there are always entrepreneurs somewhere, okay? But if those entrepreneurs are afraid of their lives, then you have none or very few who break through. But if you are managing the development process in that community, you have a critical mass of them breaking through, because you are supporting the very entrepreneurial and you are supporting those that are less entrepreneurial but willing to move. So the numbers are larger, what we call the critical mass. So if you are in a community and you popularize agriculture and you support those that are willing to break through, because of the larger numbers, there's a less likelihood that there will be a fear of being bewitched, because it's a movement, it's a community movement forward. So it is not isolated. So in the end, that critical mass overcomes the social cultural inertia of fear that may exist if only 2-3 people broke through. Okay? So that is where now popularizing agriculture, making it attractive, celebrating the successes even when they are small. With technology now and social media and all other platforms, it is possible for people to know the benefits of pursuing certain ventures within agriculture. Profile those. Again, we're a society that doesn't easily celebrate success. Actually, we would rather we pull a person down, what we call PhD, pull him or pull her down. So if someone succeeds, we find ways of bringing them down. We need to change that, because if we have many people going up and we keep celebrating success and we realize that their success is ours, we're likely to support them, okay, and see how they can still move forward. So there's a lot of detail. Even this is a very elaborate strategy where you begin to send out messages on SMS, the way we send out health messages, but short, brief, positive messages, maybe even questions, thought-provoking questions. We use other media and platforms to again keep sending out information that keeps reinforcing a particular agenda, because we must have an agenda and then popularize that agenda. It takes time and repeated reinforcement of a message. Billboards, because again, the media experts will tell you, if you want people to eventually come to believe this kind of thinking, you can use 3, 4, 5 different mechanisms. Okay, so you can use the phone. You can have billboards where people gather. You can have radio messages. You can have TV. I don't know what else. I'm not a media expert, but I've worked with them, and I know that they can design a plan which they can even tell you, based on what we have known from our own study and research and experience. This can't fail. The only thing that is debatable is the extent of success, right? Because that cannot be 100% predicted, okay? So if we are thinking that we'll create change of 80%, we may settle at 60%, but hey, 60% is far better than what we've ever achieved in terms of transformation. So again, it is not a shooting in the dark. It's not a hit or miss. You can work with people who will tell you it is guaranteed if we did this, we'll get buy-in. The extent of the buy-in is what we may not be 100% sure, but it will create forward momentum. And once you have energized it enough, it begins to feed into itself. It takes on a life of its own. It is no longer being cranked. We'll all be watching to see agriculture development reach a point that we didn't even think is possible, which we may not even have intended ourselves. That's the joy of seeing results that go beyond what you could have even imagined.
Thank you, Christian. That was quite elaborate, and I'm just going to try to, I was thinking in my head from what you said earlier on when you gave an example of wheat and price of bread. I'm just thinking then, we tend sometimes to think the big commercial farmers are the ones that can feed the nation. But as you have ably elaborated that the big commercial farmers, they've got large market access outside the country. And sometimes they'll grow commercial crops anyway. So if we tilt that and nurture this, the rural folk who are actually, that's their life. But unfortunately, they've grown up and we've tried to make them more peasant farmers, people that just grow for their own consumption. So this thinking of turning that, making agriculture sexy again and making it better, this rural folk actually can feed the nation. So is that what you're kind of looking at?
Look, they are literally doing that even right now, at least until recently. They have been doing that, okay? But because of the low levels of productivity, they are also net buyers. They'll produce maize, sell it, and at some point run out of their own stock of maize and look for money to actually buy some of the mini meal, And sometimes the mindset issue, they want to buy breakfast because it makes them feel, a status thing. They would have sold their maize and buy breakfast, which is even more expensive, rather than grinding their own maize, which is more nutritious. But Zambian farmers, because of the number of people growing maize, because it's a cultural thing, we produce a lot of maize. I have seen farmers in Petauke lead the country in maize production. Of course, some of them are emergent farmers, okay? Because some of them reach a point where they emerge. I have seen farmers in Kaoma lead the country in maize production. I've seen farmers in Mbala be in the top 10 in terms of maize production. Personal experience firsthand, okay? So they are already producing a lot of maize because of the sheer number of people involved, okay? We grow maize all over the place, okay? But it is productivity. So when we are popularizing agriculture and trying to create change, it is the productivity. How much effort are we putting into that maize production? We are so used to growing it, we plant and do a few things and move on, and we don't manage it very well. So if we manage that maize extremely well, we can hit 10 tons per hectare. I mean, there are places where when it's highly mechanized, they hit 12 tons a hectare. But for us, we're at 1 to 2 tons. Generally, that's where we've been the last time I checked. I haven't checked for a while. But it's around 1 to 2 tons per hectare. That's very low. Because even just normal management of a crop, you can hit 5 tons. If we depoliticize the fertilizer, we'll be getting appropriate fertilizers for different regions of this country. Because we have politicized and people are cashing in on it, they'll bring a certain type of fertilizer and it's given to everybody. We don't need the same type of fertilizer everywhere, okay? So, but there's confusion there. All those are issues that will require political will, so that at the end of the day, when we popularize agriculture and we increase the productivity, and for some regions, they move out of maize because it's better to grow something else, while others are improving productivity of maize, others are improving productivity of something else. And then those sell their something else and buy the maize that they need, okay? So that is how you diversify, manage your risk, and that is what we need to do. If you look at Vietnam, Vietnam exports rice. Who grows that rice? Smallholder farmers who are very productive, 1 to 2 hectares. They are so productive that they earn a living and export. and it can be landed in Zambia cheaper than the rice we produce ourselves. Because of productivity, you become efficient, you lower your production cost, then you can sell it at a lower price, you become competitive, your rice sells better than other rice. So productivity is a big thing that we must popularize, and we show the farmers that it's worth their while, and we'll get high yields and move people out of poverty.
That's brilliant. I just remember one head that Ruth Henson from Livingstone, who argued that a lot of our farmers, a lot of these so-called the urban ones, they go back to their little farm. I think she was alluding to the fact on productivity. She said, if you are not hitting the 5 ton per hectare, then don't do it. You are actually not doing anything. So that is very, very cardinal to hear it from you as well. So the point then is we need to find a mechanism of graduating these farmers into a much higher productivity ratios per hectares. So that's the key. And what you're saying is, if we rebrand this agriculture, we look at all these aspects, that could help us push us to that position. That's
exactly. And I'm saying, let's talk to not agriculture experts. Let's talk to the people that know how to rebrand. Let's talk to the people that know how to convince you to buy sand in a desert. You know what I mean? Or to buy ice in, as they say, in the North Pole. Those people are good at crafting mechanisms to persuade even a skeptic. Those people are not agriculture experts, but they're the ones who know. The agriculture experts know that we want to get people to 5 tons. Okay, we needed that from the agriculture experts, and we need to hear from the agriculture experts what needs to be done in terms of activity. But how we convince a person to move from the activity they're engaged in to that higher level of commitment are skills which may not lie in an agriculture expert, and it also has its own expertise that we must tap into. That is the kind of conversations that we need to be having. They are doing that elsewhere. So this is not new and original, what I'm saying. It is happening in other parts of the world.
Christian, that's powerful. Before I ask you the last question, you mentioned something very important. I don't know how I picked it up. You mentioned about comparative advantage, and then you also stated that not every province should get the same type of fertilizer. So in essence, what you're saying is each province has got a different soil type. So using that, you can now find that you can now make a strategy which says the soil in Luapula is good for that. So let's grow this. So to maximize production per hectare, the soil in Chipata or in Eastern Province, Maimbuyas, is very good for maize. Let's invest a lot of money in maize there to maximize production. I think that would be a very good strategy. Over to you before I ask the last question.
Yeah, but remember, I put a caveat there. When you are looking at ecological zones and the other various factors, they may not follow the boundaries of follow the political boundaries or the governance boundaries. So it is convenient to follow provincial boundaries because there is an administration that can help coordinate it. Okay, there's a structure there that can help manage whatever initiative. But we must be careful not to start from there. We start by looking at just this landmass called Zambia and seeing what needs to be done in different places. And then from there, now begin to say, okay, which one fits well in this province that may spill over into another province. So it may not be each province. It may be 2-3 provinces clustered. It may be part of one province clustered this way and the other, that kind of thing. So as long as we are allowing the science to lead us, and then coming to look at the governance arrangement because we need them, yes, then we can have different interventions, different types of fertilizer in different regions, and so on, and different many things, even different crops in the different areas. Okay, of course, it doesn't mean you can't grow maize in this area. It just means the crop of emphasis is different. Okay, and you support it more, so it becomes attractive. More people move there. And in another area, it may be a combination, a portfolio of crops. It may be in this area, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on what people prefer. You know, they have a choice. So again, you support that. So it is that very deliberate and purposeful kind of process, but where we are allowing the science to lead us, and then but we're taking account of the other factors that are equally important for success.
That's fantastic, Christian. My next question before Mr. Bimbe comes in. You clearly stated that the implementation of this roadmap or plan will need to be backed by well-organized and efficient delivery system that also celebrate positive strides while addressing any setbacks. But in a nutshell, Dr. Christian, how should the implementation of such a roadmap or plan look like?
Okay.
Over to you.
Now, one of the reasons why, especially in African countries, these initiatives are best led by presidents is because of the amount of power that sits in the presidency for most African countries. Okay, they are able to issue what you might call decrees quite easily. Okay, and it change the landscape. Okay, so now when it comes to implementation, because remember we started from saying that at the first place we must plan. Number one, planning. Okay. Then we've said that number 2 is stakeholder facilitation. Number 3 is rebranding agriculture. Number 4 is systems for implementation. A president is able to change a landscape very quickly by saying we are now going to have this arrangement there. We're going to have an office, you know, literally decree a department of government, literally if it means a ministry, whatever, you know, even if it may have to be ratified by parliament. But a president, once it's a clear framework that they have in front of them, that convinces them that this will deliver results that they have been looking for. It aligns to their vision and it responds to political imperatives. They are able to actually just say from tomorrow, the following things must come in. The next 3 months, let's put this together. Because you are going to need investment of money to build a coordinating mechanism, a management mechanism. I don't know where it will sit. That is a decision of the relevant people, but it just must exist. Okay, that is now going to drive this process with people given sufficient authority, span of authority, to actually make decisions that fit within a certain framework. Okay, they have been told this is what you must achieve over this period of time. These are the milestones you must be achieving over time. Then leave them to make decisions that take them there. Okay, of course they're reporting and you know what decisions they have made. They're not left alone completely, but they are able to make the decisions and report the decisions they're making, and we move like that. There's a process that has been put in place. There is a mechanism for picking up results, what we traditionally call monitoring and evaluation. We must have sensors, and technology here comes in very well because information can be gathered very quickly, analyzed, and using the analysis, we know what we should do more, what we should do less, you know, which direction we should go, you know, the value of information. So based on that, we can, in 3 years, I argue, transform agriculture because we have worked with the plans that exist and tweaked them to fit what we want. Number 2, we facilitated stakeholder engagement. Number 3, we have popularized agriculture. Number 4, we have built delivery mechanisms that allow for feedback, for us to know whether we're going in the right direction or not. The feedback is used for dissemination because remember when you set out on a journey, you have a lot of skeptics, okay? You may have the majority even skeptics. The reason why you have even just gone on that journey is because the data tells you it's the right direction, okay? So when you are setting off, you may even be in the minority. The only reason you are going is because the information here is clearly going to produce results. Now, for you to begin to win people over, the implementation mechanism must have clear feedback mechanisms that allow for you to begin to share the results very early, so that you start this crowding in effect that allow more people to be involved, to support, to participate. And before you know it, once they join 3 dots, even if you have not reached success, I tell my students and the children, I say, you know, when you have 3 dots, then you have a good idea where you are going, because 2 dots, it can still be going down like that. But 3 dots tell you that there is 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. So there's a high chance of this thing continuing. And so you start looking for more dots to see if it's going to keep going up. So even in the process of implementation, the moment people have the proverbial 3 dots, even before you arrive, they begin to see likelihood of success, okay? And they begin to support and to invest time, money, effort into making sure this thing succeeds, because everybody wants to be part of success. So, and for me, the ultimate message is success doesn't just happen, it is caused. And this is where the hard work must come in.
That's fantastic, Christian. Mr. Bimbe, any question, comments on that?
Thank you very much, Christian. That was fantastic. I don't have any questions and comment. I'm just loving it in the way that Christian has laid it out. There is a process. There is a deliberate way of looking at things, and the whole idea of multidisciplinariness in the terms of handling such a policy. It's not only just agriculturists. It also requires technologists. It also requires anthropologists. It requires
Mr. Bimbe, sorry to cut you short. Just hold that thought. It looks like you've already started giving your closing remarks, and that's what
Okay.
I wanted to ask you. So, make please give your closing remarks also.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
it's this looking at multidisciplinariness in everything we do, because everything that happens, even in government, these ministry demarcations, they are actually artificial. When you look at the way things happen, even for an individual to do, say, a transaction and get a fulfillment, they might transverse different departments, different ministries. And because of that, that's why we find in Zambia that a lot of things they'll tell you, we cannot do that. Can you go to that ministry, have it stamped, and then come back? It's that identification that these are cross-cutting. We need different things. So in terms of the way Christian has put this agriculture, we need to bring that to bear as well. It's like in Formula One, you have a pit stop. There are different kind of skills around that car. And you can see the efficiency that comes out, changing tires, putting fuel, checking the sensors, checking everything. And that technique is also used now in hospitals, medicine, like the UK. They borrowed that kind of approach. So I think it's high time we start appreciating everything. It makes me cry sometimes when I hear people say, why do we learn history? It's not going to help me. Why do I learn about Zinjanthropa? There are all these things. But once you start looking at this critically, and I've worked in this kind of area when we looked at Ebola it was this Sierra Leone again. It wasn't the science that created a lot of havoc. It was the cultural aspect on the barriers and whatever. Yes, the science was good on the medical side, but that culture. So I think even when we deal with every aspect and bring in an intervention, it's high time, can't we start learning to create a multidisciplinary team? No skill set is lower than the other. They all have a role to play. And I think that's my biggest takeaway from this discussion. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bimbe. Christian, I'm going to give you your time to give your closing remark. But before I do that, there's a developing news. I just want you to deal with that and then give a closing remarks. It looks like political because this is the news that came out in a Kenyan newspaper called The Citizen Reporter, and now it's all over Zambia, social media, and our our opposition are now, attacking government. So this is what the story says. The Agriculture and Livestock Development Cabinet Secretary of Kenya, Mr. Mitika, held bilateral talks with a Zambian counterpart, Mr. Ruben Mitolo, in Lusaka. I think it was today, this morning, or last Monday. It just says on Monday. And part of this discussion was the Zambian government giving land for large scale farming to the Kenyans. The Kenyans have got, unlike like Zambia, Kenya doesn't have the good rains and the soil that we have. Zambia has got the best, we've got land, environment, water, everything, good soil. And ugali, ugali, very important everywhere. It's a political issue everywhere. So the Kenyans are saying for food security, for us to win the next elections, there must be food security. So what do we do? If we can grow more maize in Zambia, why can't we encourage our large scale, farmers? Obviously it's backed by banks and financial institutions. You never know, maybe even the government is involved, but it's large scale farming. They will be growing maize in Zambia, creating jobs. Obviously there will be investors. They will bring in money into Zambia, grow maize, but the purpose is to export that maize to Kenya. I don't know whether it will be uwunga or just maize. I don't know about that. But then, Christian, in your closing remarks, can you just comment on this issue? Because the opposition are saying you cannot give land to the Kenyans, and yet Zambians don't have land, you know.
Yeah. For Christian,
Okay.
come in as well.
So what I want
I would
you
like
is
to just,
what I want, Christian, is, yeah, Mr. Bimbe, I'll give you the point. After Mr. Bimbe has spoken, what I want you is to comment on that, and then also to give your closing remarks. But before that, Mr. Bimbe wants to say something. Over to you, Mr. Bimbe.
thank you very much. It's again cheap politicking. First thing I'll say. I don't see anything wrong with that. It's investment. We are an African continent. We are in the Africa free trade area where anybody can move around. But again, if we go back, I don't know, with Christian who may touch that, there used to be outgrower schemes for paprika, right? And if you remember, countries like the UK, the US, were pumping money into Zambia for farmers to grow paprika for what? For export to those countries. So what is the problem with that? So I don't see the problem. The problem, I think, is more emotive, because if land is idle, and we've got this concept of that land is, that's what we need, is an asset. But, well, land becomes an asset if it's productive, right? So if these people are coming with the money, the technology, the skills, why not? And, if we go backwards, when our neighbor privatized or rather grabbed some of the land, what happened? Some of those big farmers came into Zambia, in Mkushi. And before long, Zambia was exporting maize back to the same country. So yeah, I think it's just a political thing, but I think these things needs to be called out. So that's the way I would put it, probably. I think Christine will have a better answer on that, a better response. Thank you.
Over to you, Dr. Chileshe.
Okay. I may not have maybe sufficient detail to conclude on what the issues might be, because sometimes they say the devil is in the detail. But what is fact is some of the things you've raised, Mr. Bimbe, there, that on the face of it, you can't say Kenyans can't come and buy land here and work with that land, but lease land, actually, because in Zambia we don't sell land. At the end of the day, it's lease. And when you sell your right to that land, your lease. Okay? I hope people understand that. Basically, we buy a lease to a piece of land, and then you use that land for the period of the lease. Okay? 99 years or whatever it is, 14, 25. So you cannot insist on foreigners not getting land, because if they are coming for mining, they still get land, and they extract something from that land and take it out. They come from China, they come in the country, they dig, they take out. Okay, it's been like that. Anglo-American used to do that in Kaunda's time with ZCCM, and then we continued. Okay, and like you have rightly said, Zimbabwean farmers have come in Zambia and they have farmed. Okay, so on the face of it, you can't use the argument of because they are foreigners you can't give them. That one it can't fly anywhere. Okay, but there are places where, for instance, you might want to use it as a leverage bargaining point. For instance, there are some countries where it's difficult for a foreigner to get land. Okay, now if you happen to get those people to come in your country, they're looking for land. As much as there is nothing wrong with them getting land here, I would use it as a bargaining chip to say, no, here where you are coming, we give land, but you want land here, but if I come to your country, it's not the same. Why? Because here we allow. If you want to also come here, can you have the same? So it's possible that this is whether it's politics or business, we use points of advantage to negotiate arrangements. If I own the land and a mining company is coming, I'll negotiate the taxation and all. And if they don't like it, let them go. We have not been good at that. We make it look like we're desperate, even if it's our land. Okay, so you do not stop the mining company coming in, set your terms. Okay, we do that. You cannot stop farmers coming to grow for export. Set the terms, okay, which are favorable to Zambia, and also which create a kind of a reciprocal arrangement where if a Zambian wanted to do anything in Kenya, they're not disadvantaged. It may not be in agriculture, it may be elsewhere. So that's the only thing I would say. But otherwise, to say they can't come because of they are foreigners, that one, it doesn't fly unless there's something else. Now, for me, my closing remarks are simple. Number one, let's revisit the plans and the information that we have that already exists to develop agriculture. It's already there. Let's mobilize stakeholders and create mechanisms for engagement with stakeholders so that there is buy-in, there is participation, there is ownership. That's not difficult because generally everybody knows agriculture is profitable if it's done right. It's food mostly, okay, and other crops. Number three, we can reshape the thinking of agriculture in Zambia if we allow the experts to show us how. Number four, we need to build the mechanisms for implementation. Success doesn't just happen, it is caused. And we need political will because leadership must come from government. Thank you.
Christian, that's fantastic. And I can't even add any more. But we've got two of our Bakwetu guests. They are part of Bakwetu, and our culture is we cannot allow you to go until they make a comment or even ask a question. So we were supposed to close, but would you mind if I can introduce them, and if they've got a question or a comment, and you have to comment on it.
No
Is that
problem.
okay? No
That is
problem.
okay, sir.
Yeah, Mukelebai and Joseph, welcome. Can you guys show your videos so that the viewers can see you? And yeah, welcome, guys. Mukelebai, Joseph. Well, long time. Where have you been hiding?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chilufya. Thank you, Dr. Chileshe. Thank you, Mr. Bimbe. Thank you, Mkelabai, and thanks to the viewers watching us.
Yeah. So I'll give you time, Joseph. I'll start with Muke. Beauty before age. Mukelebai.
Yes, please. How are you, my brothers and my fellow Zambians?
You are welcome. So,
We are fine.
without wasting much of our time, the time of our guest,
Yes.
any comments, any questions? You must have been following.
Yes, I've been following.
Christian, what's going to happen? Mukeleba, you will talk, make a comment or question, and then Joseph will do the same, and then I'll ask you to finally close. Over
Okay,
to you,
thank you.
Mukeleba.
Thank you. What Dr. Chileshe Muchwani?
Mchwani.
No, Ritumezi. That's good. That's Ritumezi. That's Riketire. Otherwise, Mwambozi, you have spoken very well. You were actually on point in all the issues that you've raised, and I don't want us to add or subtract. The only thing I wanted to comment on was on our behavior as Zambians, where we hear people complaining over the issue of our brothers in Kenya that have expressed intentions to come and utilize our climate, our good soil, fertile, and grow or utilize the land for agriculture purposes so we can have more food. And I don't understand why today we should point a finger and cry that our brothers from Kenya cannot. Yet we are the ones that we also Zambians frequent Nairobi to purchase a lot of things from them when we see that their economy, the Kenyan economy and our economy, they're quite different. Kenya is quite advanced. So I don't understand where we are getting this xenophobic type of attitude where we want to neglect our own. We would rather bring Chinese and put them in police and allow them to sell chicken or grow chicken when our own neighboring countries are unable to come and invest in our own country because they are not coming for free. That's what my brothers and sisters back home should understand, that if we have people that have identified an opportunity that we are not utilizing, mostly it's when we Zambians, we are so much into politics because we know that that's where Kangono is. Would rather go in politics and forgetting about the real issues, agriculture, that is going to help us put food on our table. So it's not a question per se, but I just wanted to put up a contribution to say we should not be able to treat one another, especially treating our fellow African brothers and sisters differently when it comes to development or investment in our country. We need Kenyans as much as they need us for us to thrive in our country. That's the only best. That's what I can say for now. Otherwise, we should not be politicizing for small little details. There's nothing there. But we know our opposition today that they have a problem. But they behave quite dementia. Sorry to those who are sick, but otherwise, it was just an example. Not that I'm trying to put them down. That's what I can say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mukelevai. Christian, I hope you know Mukelevai by now.
Yes,
Is
yes,
just
yes.
forward. Yeah, yeah. But the other thing is, Mukelevai, these are large, according to the statement, these are large scale farmers. So which means they'll create jobs for Zambians. They'll bring forex also, because Kenyans will be buying that maize on using the dollars. So,
From
but
Zambia.
yeah, yeah. But what Christian said is, when these investors come or development partners come, they should fit into our model, our plans. You know, not just coming and you know, not fitting in our agenda, our plans. You know, Joseph, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much for letting me in, and good evening again, everyone and viewers. Yes, I think the the problem that I have seen is the issue of land has been the easiest historical cause of conflict around the world. Uh, uh, if you look at the Basra region, all these conflicts that have been happening around the world, mostly even historical wars, have been based on land. Even what caused the white farmers, or I would say most farmers, I'm not very sure. I'm sure there were other races of farmers that crossed into Zambia during the 1999 land crisis in Zimbabwe, which came out of a failing of the Lancaster Agreement to redistribute land. That conflict resulted into farmers being displaced. And at that point, those farmers were desperate. They were like, I would say they were agricultural refugees. They needed to find themselves somewhere within the region closest to resettle. And also at a regional framework, Zimbabwe was a food basket of Africa at the time. They produced almost everything, agro-processing, fruits. We were depending on them. And we needed to maintain that uh, agro supply chain system and food security in the region and spilling to the entire Africa. So we were, as a region, desperate not to disrupt that supply chain system. So we can understand at the time, whether people that were in politics or in the agricultural framework, that they needed to provide aid to these people so that they continue to produce more food to curb the already long-standing existing food insecurity that we've had in Africa because of obviously dependent on seed and fertilizer from abroad. We've killed our own natural system of growing food. So at that time, the circumstances allowed that influx because we needed to be a brother's keeper. But things being equal, we are not saying we can't allow people that are outside our borders to come and invest. But I think, like Dr. Chileshe said, and everyone, if we can have a deliberate mutual benefit, whether it's with an African country, an Asian country, a European country, it doesn't matter who. But because Africa hasn't yet reached a level of unity where countries have certain understandings that are robust, where it's very easy for one to just go into Tanzania, do something, it's very easy to go into Nigeria. There's still a division where each country wants to be better than the other. And this trickles down to the cultural setup and the social structure, where, let's say, for instance, this land is given where it's controlled by the chiefs. And then you find that people in that chiefdom are not bound to that idea. So it borders down to what Dr. Chileshe said. It's not more of political. I think it's more strongly held on the cultural and the social value people place on this. So such agreements we should really be patient and careful and not allow a political agenda to supersede national interest. I think we need to really be careful, be very consultative, so that at least, because issues of land are very sensitive, no matter how much development we get, there will still at one point, even in the future, there will be a conflict that may arise over how did these people have this land and how, and the question how come about. And what creates such anxiety in the country is when there has been less consultation to undertake an issue as sensitive as giving land, whether it's on lease or not. But the issue is, as long as the understanding from the beginning was unnatural and inadequate, it will in future definitely create this issue. It happened even in Zimbabwe after the farmers were displaced. It still came back. Why? Because the way the land was allocated, it was more of a political rush. At that time, may he so rest in peace, the freedom fighter, Robert Mugabe, he also needed to win an election at that time. An election was coming. So you see that when issues of land are rushed, no matter how well you intend for development, there will always be a time it will catch up with you. So I think this is why it becomes very emotive, and it becomes an issue where opinions, go into flames. So if we put ourselves in a position where, yes, it's a fellow African country, we're not refusing, but at the end of the day, these economies are trying to thrive as independent national states. So I haven't seen Africa to have come together economically and deliberately to want to solve problems interlinked. So that Kenya does, I think, a lot of coffee, there's tourism, things like that. We do a lot of maize and cash crops and all that. We've got our own, environmental advantages and climatic comparative advantages and markets and all those. So we are still operating quite independently and not yet together. So such undertakings, I think this is why these questions have come up, because it's like a surprise. Nobody has really heard it before. It was actually a headline, I think, on NTV in Kenya. It's not even on a Zambian platform, for that matter. So already that just makes people ask questions like, how come a headline is coming from another country when it involves our land? Already there's a question how. And for me, from what I've seen where conflicts have erupted from land issues, I think this matter must be, no matter how good intended it is, I think it must be well explained to the people so that it doesn't erupt in the future unexpectedly. I don't know if that satisfies the question, but I think my question I wanted to pose to probably everyone, and I think probably Dr. Chileshe, is, have you, in your line of practice, come across the inclusion of nutritional policy into our agricultural systems? Because up to now, I know that I ended up having shima and what we eat as local delicacy out of how I was born in Zambia, and that's the food we've been eating. I don't know whether it was a colonial suggestion to say, shima is a carbohydrate. If people are working too hard as laborers, it lasts long. I don't know how it came about that our staple food is shima, but we've got sorghum, we've got other, cucumbers, we've got all different nutritious foods in Africa, which can help us to curb food security. So coming to where we are now, I see like we keep going back and forth. We have never had a conclusive framework in the agriculture sector. We are always wanting to diversify, but we seem not to get it. Have we incorporated a nutritional policy into our agricultural frameworks that we put in plan so that works in tandem with what our own culture, as a setting who we are? It makes it easier for us to grow, for export and for consumption, what suits us.
Joseph, thank you so much for that. Dr. Christian, it looks like he's gotten busy last minute. I'll add two comments which you can answer together with Joseph's question. Somebody is saying, don't give land to the Kenyans to come and invest here, large-scale farming. Let's capitalize Zambians and offer them land. In this country, are we alive? And then one of our regular viewers, Davis Simbai, have been saying this for years. I think he's in favor of the Kenyan investors coming into Zambia. Africa can and should only unite in regional blocks, first as phase one. Over to you, Christian.
Thank you. Maybe just a quick one. I think a lot has been said on the issue of the Kenyan issue. Well, I think if Kenyans are going to come here, and they're going to take large amounts of land like the others have, okay? There must be an agriculture framework within which we know that works for us as well, okay? We can't, obviously we can't say they can't come, because they can. There's really, at the basic level, no issue that should stop a Kenyan to come and get land in Zambia, especially that we do not have a shortage of land in Zambia. Access to land continues to become easier and easier for those that want it. In fact, land is being abandoned in Zambia as people move to urban centers, okay? But again, there are other reasons why that is happening. We're not doing our work as the duty bearers who should help them stay on that land. So there are many factors, okay? But like has been rightly said by Joseph, there are social cultural issues. You don't manage those, and even political issues. You don't manage those, there will be a backlash. Whether you are right is not the issue. It's how have you managed the process, even if you think you are right. So that is critical. Okay, there must be a framework within which we do these things, and that framework is what I'm advocating for. And I'm saying in 3 years we can transform Zambia's agriculture sector by following those steps. A key component, the social cultural aspects, which will address all those issues. If we're going to bring foreigners here and they're going to be given land, how have we addressed the social cultural dynamics? Okay, that's very important. The current government, in my opinion, and this is not a political statement, it's purely an observation from a developmental perspective, has not been very good at communication. Okay, they are too often caught on the back foot, and then you start having, I mean, like you're saying, you have a headline in Kenya, and then things are beginning to trickle here. The same road issue, there are questions that have not been answered about the road issue. We are told Zambia, the government, will have a share of the revenues. We have not been given the number. So why have we been told something that leaves certain things that are clearly, there are some things that you can't disclose, of course, initially at least. But to fail to tell people how much percentage Zambian government will get, you are failing to tell your employer how much money is coming from the shareholders, an investment you are making on behalf of shareholders. So how do you withhold telling the shareholder? You know, some things defy logic, okay? There are some things you can argue and say, I can't tell you, and there will be a reason, A, B, C, D, and throw it out there. Those who are rational will tell you that's reasonable. But if you're going to say you can't say what percentage you're going to get, and you can't tell me the owner of the money, okay, that's the problem. If you tell me that's yet to be concluded, that's another story. Again, communicate quickly. We're still negotiating the percentages. We'll come back to you. That's fine. For me, I'll wait. But when there's a vacuum, you allow a lot of others to enter and muddle up everything. Because you left a vacuum and then you are coming back to come and make a statement to correct. But by the time truth is putting on its boots, as they say, a rumor or lie is already halfway around the world. Okay? So I think they need to improve their communication so that even when they are wrong, they are clear. They will be wrong sometimes. But even when they are wrong, they have told us a wrong thing, and we've reacted to that issue, and they have come back and say, okay, we have heard you, we're now going to do this. It's better to be clear and wrong than to have a vacuum and create suspicion. Because if you are communicating and you are wrong, I'll trust you because I know when you go wrong, you always tell me. So I will trust you because I know you're going to come back to me. I will tell you when you are wrong, you're going to listen. So trust is not affected even by mistakes. But trust is affected when you are not communicating. So if I can't trust you, how do I give you a mandate to run? I'll start questioning even what I shouldn't question. I'll be suspicious where I shouldn't. So we must not create a problem that we become again victims of as a government. So I think they need to do better on communication. Then on the nutrition issue, the issue of nutrition has been talked about like you can't believe it. At one point, on a nutritional score, a global nutritional score, Zambia was second lowest, only better than Haiti at one point. I remember I was still busy working in the sector. And I remember the government said, what? How can we be? And when we interrogate the figures, you discover it's true because of this issue of starch. If you're going to be feeding people starch and other things are missing, when you sum all the variables together, you are still going to be very low because a person does not live on starch alone, you know. So again, we have started improving because it caused the crisis. And then there was a revisit and a lot of issues, a lot of talk, and quite a bit of movement. But we have still not been very good at, because nutrition policy should become the impetus for agriculture. It's one of the arguments for what we should do, how we should do it, what crop you plant, where, and all those other decisions. Because the first thing is this country and providing food security. Food security is not growing everything, but it's growing what you should grow and accessing other things that you can't grow. But have we clearly defined what we can grow? You know? So on that one, we have a lot of work, and that's an aspect you have rightly mentioned that should be integrated within the whole conversation on agriculture, because the aspect of nutrition is at the rock bottom of it. Otherwise, why are we growing food if we're not thinking about what food should be grown and who must eat it? Okay, it's national security is linked to food production. If you are importing most of your staple food, you're exposing yourself as a country, your very existence as a country. Okay, so now what are we growing? How are we growing it? And how are we providing for our people is a fundamental issue that affects the very existence of a country. So it cannot be, emphasized. And you've raised an important issue that is not yet very well handled. My last remarks are just to say, I've proposed a 4-step plan over 3 years. It is not personal to Hoda. I have made it known publicly here. Someone can run with it. Look, there's nothing new about what I have said. I don't even have to be involved. Okay? Because each time I've mentioned something, there's somebody who understands it. I've mentioned something else, somebody understands it. So the duty bearers can actually identify people who can come together and do even better than what I've said. Even add a few other things that will make the whole thing work better. Okay? So at the end of the day, what has been said now can be developed. Does someone care to think about this thing for their own good and the good of the country and the continent at large? That's the challenge I would like to leave for the duty bearers. Thank you very much.
Christian, that was fantastic. And am I allowed 1 minute or so to give a closing remark? I just wanted to comment on something. Joseph, you are shaking your head. You want to say something before we close?
No, I'm agreeing with. I'm enjoying.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah.
I don't know if I don't know if I'll take the show, because I think a lot has been has been said. The most important point actually that I was probably gonna mention sometime later, if you had not asked me to, was the communication part, which Dr. Chileshe said. This problem of policy and I would say framework agendas being abruptly, put across and catching people unaware is what really is really making us stagnant and always seem like we're in a hurry to try and get results where we've not really put the plan very well. I think it's I've seen it a lot on youth empowerments. I've seen it a lot on social empowerments. Agriculture has not really been, allocated a very good, I would say, instrument that can really make it have an anchor to rest on, like a foundation where it sits on, come a disaster. Like if I'm to ask right now, if we had a natural disaster in Zambia, where we've probably got massive floods for probably a couple of months, and that most of the maize fields are devastated and things like that. How secure are we with our food? Because those are the things we have to look at. Even during the time of COVID, for instance, I had written an article 2 years before COVID where I'd said, if we do not secure our food and our economies in advance, should there come a disaster of any kind, we'll be hit so bad. And this is why even our agricultural produce and our food security across the continent, as we are right now, there is a crisis, because we were unprepared we seem to operate on a cash and spend basis and not really put up a framework that supports itself, like it recycles itself within itself. And if you look at the way the money is, they lend the money on agriculture, it's pretty much, not very, very well accessible. So the old Lima Bank system was a very, very good practice. If there's a way we can get it back, maybe, and have it in the modern time where we are, and have something, agriculture should be given a separate access of fund, which is so specific and so deliberate that it supersedes everything else. And I think I wouldn't really add much. I think the panel really gave it all. I think I'll probably end here for now.
Fantastic, Joseph. I know you've got talk time. We can go on and on. Christian, and all the guests, thank you so much. I just wanted to say something. This is what we've been talking about a lot with Mr. Bimbe. And Christian and Joseph, you've just mentioned what I wanted to talk about. Policy communication with our current government. This is not a criticism. This is a contribution. This is a government I supported and I still support. And they've done a lot of good things, and but when it comes to communicating that policy is where we are failing. And one would wonder, why are the opposition making a lot of noise? Because we are not communicating clearly. We're not communicating properly, clearly, in a simple way where a layman can understand. So what is happening? We are leaving a vacuum. And what is the opposition doing? They are taking advantage. And what are we doing? Firefighting. Look at, I've seen the projects which were done in Zambia, previous government. Some of them white elephants. I've talked about it clearly. No proper business model. When you look at that road from Ndola to Lusaka to Ndola, there is a proper business model. But the problem is that model hasn't been what they were supposed to communicate it before they signed that agreement. Communicate it. That's how you communicate policy. You need buy-in from the people. Mr. Bimbe would agree with me. You need buy-in from the people. Explain to the people, even where a layman can understand. Some countries, they even translate that policy into local languages because a lot of people don't understand Ichisungu. I lived in one country. The best example is South Africa. I lived in South Africa for 10 years. Lived in South Africa, 6 years in Johannesburg, 4 years in Cape Town. When they come up with a big policy thing, they will communicate it in Zulu, in Xhosa, in Sotho, because there's not so many South Africans are educated. They didn't have an opportunity to go to school. Their constitution is in the local languages. This is what this government has done a lot. Even that model, when I looked at the business model for this road, it's powerful. It's got a repayment plan, everything, but it wasn't properly communicated. And then what happened? The opposition, they left a vacuum. The opposition took advantage. And then what did we start doing? Firefighting. And are we going to continue firefighting all the time?
Yeah.
And if we don't know, there's so many organizations that can help. Yeah. Mr. Bimbe worked for IDC, International Development.
I mean,
all those organizations can help. There are so many think tanks that can help. If we don't know how to communicate, let's ask for help.
I think
over to you, Mr. Bimbe.
The thing is, communication is the one thing I've observed in Zambia, and from where I've worked and what I've seen, how governments communicate. What I've always got annoyed with, all successful government in Zambia, they think communicating is a press statement. Okay? Now, a press statement to you or Christian or Joseph is actually a conclusion of something, because that press statement was underpinned by certain thinking and assumptions. And that is what is usually lacking. So you go to Western countries, the UK, the US, when they are communicating policy at that time, they will have the whole big, massive document with the thinking, who are the winners, who are the losers, what literature has been in, what focus group they've done, what modeling they've done, and they'll put it there. Sometimes they'll even give certain things to think tanks or trusted media to summarize. Then they'll have a frequently asked question, and everything will be there, embargoed. Immediately it's announced, they unembargo that. And when they post on Facebook, they'll point you to where the thing is. But what I see is A4 paper, blah, 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 blah. And then the UPND Facebook page starts picking elements and sticking on Facebook without going back to what is the basis for this communication. So I think this is where we are getting a problem, where people think communicating is just throwing things on Facebook, on Twitter, on whatever. No, it has to be, it's everything, as Dr. Christian has said, all those things that needs to come together. I think this government really need to be good at that. There's no need to find, this is why we find to get a lot of good data about Zambia, you cannot find it in Zambia. Even Zamstat cannot give you, they just give you a summary. You have to go to the World Bank, or you have to go to universities in the US and the UK, where their researchers have gone there and they've been given access to that information that the Zambian are not privy to. And what happens? That information goes out, gets repackaged and sold to investors that then come with an advantage because they know exactly what's going on. So we really need to work on that. I like everybody here. Each program we have, there is always that still comes up. But what it is I think we need to start now going further and say, oh, this lack of communication. I think we need to really nail it. What is it? How do I unpack that communication? Because it seems when you bring it up, they'll say, oh, we communicate. We put it on Facebook.
Yeah.
That's my take.
It looks like Christian, Dr. Christian, Joseph, anything last minute. It looks like this is a very
from
important.
Me. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Christian. Dr. Christian, I think is frozen. Can you hear me?
Oh, nothing from me. Yes,
Okay.
I can. Nothing from me, sir.
Okay, thank you. On that note, we're coming to the close of the show. It was a fantastic show. Joseph, Mukelevai, Mr. Bimbe, Dr. Christian, that was fantastic. Well elaborated. Thank you so much for coming and for your time. All our viewers, wherever you're watching us all over the world, thank you so much for your viewership. And may the good Lord bless our beloved mother, Zambia. Bye for now. Good night.